Yeah, I figured. All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for spending time with us this afternoon. There might be some other folks joining us, but give you a little overview of our agenda today. So we're going to talk about some common disasters that affect states like Minnesota and Colorado. We were in Colorado earlier this week having the same conversation. And well, there's some differences though between Minnesota and Colorado, which you'll see in a couple in here. Then we're going to go through, we're going to have some conversations, and I'm hoping, so I'm giving you a little warning right now for those of you, some people like to get warmed up if we're going to try and get some interaction, so I'm warning you now that I'm going to ask for some stories, because one of the stories, for example, in Colorado that affected one of the folks there was that they had squirrels chew through power lines that caused their building to get knocked out of power. So if you got any stories like that, I'd really love to hear them, and there might be a raffle ticket involved if you tell one. Maybe. We'll see how good the story is. And then, so we're going to go through some stories and tell a little bit about that, and what are the things you can do to mitigate against some of these common risks, and things that actually happen. Fortunately, not so often, but they happen enough that they can cause a problem. Then we're going to have Bobby come up from Datto, and he's going to walk us through a demo on their solution. It's one of the recommended solutions that Mytech leverages for all of our clients. And then we're going to break for some food. So the food's not here yet, but there'll be food laid out over there. And then we're actually going to do a Make IT Easy launch. So Mytech has been working with, we actually, part of our peer group, we won a Shark Tank marketing competition earlier this year. Part of that was Make IT Easy. We want to try and have a movement to help educate and make people aware about the cloud and as a service offerings, things like that. So we're going to talk about that, and there's going to be some interaction there as well with opportunities to win another raffle ticket. And then at the end of that, we're actually going to give away the raffle. So we're hoping that you can stick around to that. All in all, it'll be around 4 o'clock-ish when we wrap up. So, and then I'm going to crack a beverage after that. Okay, so without further ado, this on. Pretty good. Why did it not? I need to click on the PowerPoint, that's why. There we go. Gotta remember that. Okay, so here's what we're gonna talk about today. Preparing for some known problems that happen, right? The reality is we all rely on power, I think. We all rely on internet. And there's some things you can do to mitigate against common outages that affect your business. And then, of course, we're gonna do in the server failure and recovery, and there will be some fire involved for those of you who saw that on our as we communicated it. So let's start. Let's talk about power. One of the things I love about this quote from InsideEnergy.org that actually tracks and data as far as power outages and things like that is that, it's pretty much the expectation of folks in the U.S., at least in the U.S., that, you flip on a light switch and it always works. Anybody ever, I don't know if I ever think about whether or not a light switch is going to work unless I'm in the middle of an electrical storm, right? So that's great, except when it doesn't. And one of the things that's part in line with the Make IT Easy campaign and the communication and education and awareness on that is this is really how we want our IT to work as well, right? We want to be able to flip a switch, and we want it to just expect it to work, right? So that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. So some data, some trivia. So from a national average perspective, does anyone have any guesses of how many minutes per year on average that there are outages in the US? So we got to get some guesses. There might be raffle tickets involved. 7 minutes. Okay, we're going to give you a raffle ticket, but 8 minutes. So this is not Price is Right, and you don't get a raffle ticket. Luke's one of our vendor partners from SonicWall, so thank you for joining, but no raffle tickets for you, sir. Any other guesses? It's more than that, I'll tell you that. It's basically, so InsideEnergy they track and they receive data from all of the electrical utilities around the country as far as just outages and averages. So they actually track it in different states have different ones. We're going to go into Colorado and Minnesota next. But nationally, 686, okay. So we'll give you that. So we hand that down. If this was Price is Right, sir, you would win because the net average on 200 minutes. Just again, to put it in perspective, as far as when we're talking about power outages, this happens. And so on average, that's what it is. So Colorado, no guesses on this one, but I'm going to get some guesses on Minnesota. Colorado is a little less than the national average at 114 minutes. I'll give you a hint, Minnesota is more than the national average, but any guesses on that? 450, okay. I mean, come on, raffle tickets, guys. Somebody say the number, it's not that hard. 285, okay. Any others before we give the answer? There we go, Stephanie's got that, thank you. 120, okay. So the answer is just under 400 minutes. So, and I think that this does include data, they actually categorize the data between major incidents and just minor incidents. And so when Minnesota gets big snow years or big ice storm years, that's probably what's affecting this. And this is actually 2013 data, the last data that InsideEnergy.org had published. But yeah, so this happens, and it happens to us more than the national average, actually. So, so let's talk about it. And by the way, there's a source. So anybody, you'll get copies of these, and if you want to go check it out yourself, download the CSV file and check it out, you're more than welcome to do that. So now let's talk about internet, though. And I know it's a real profound statement saying that we rely on the internet. So that's why I'm not going to talk about it a lot. I'm just bringing it up because it's an important part of the conversation. Let me ask a question of the audience. Have you thought about how long your organization can last or operate without internet? Have you thought about it? A day? Okay. 2 days? 2 days over here? Okay. Now, interesting, because one of the reasons why I bring this up is because I bring this up because different organizations, depending on how they operate and what they do and how their infrastructure is set up, if you have hosted infrastructure, for example, that might have a bigger impact if you don't. Because now, some organizations, again, I ask you to think about this because some of these things might apply to you or they might not. Some organizations, their plan goes down at their office, well, they just send people to a coffee shop or send people home. Right. That might work for some organizations. Now, one of the attendees in Colorado was a medical facility that can't do that because they can't send their patients to a coffee shop to access the medical records, right? They have to do it in their offices. So that doesn't always apply. So part of the reason why I ask this question is because it does apply to everyone differently, but part of understanding what you could and should do about it depends on how that affects your business, right? So, so we're gonna talk about, and then of course I just little Abraham Lincoln humor. Honest Abe, giving us a little advice. All right, sorry, I had to throw a little something there. Okay, so now is where I'm going to tell a few stories of actually either to Mytech or some of our clients, and welcome all of you to think of a story that you can tell that some outages happened. There was a big ice storm. One of our clients, about a 35-person organization, they were out for about 4 or 5 business days. Now their organization was such that they're in the like a manufacturer rep industry, so they are getting paid because their product is already on the shelves or already being bought. So that didn't really affect them that much as far as the revenue coming in. It just affected more future stuff that they had to then play catch up. But that's definitely something that, I mean, we've had ice storms here in Minnesota. That was a client that was here in Minnesota. Affected them in particular worse than others. But ice storms happen and outages happen, so what can you do about it? What are some of the things you can plan around that? Any stories around ice storms that might have affected people that's interesting, unique? No? All right. We got more. So who was here when this storm happened? Yeah? I lived about right here when that storm happened. I could see it from when I didn't see it collapse, but I could see it from my window. Then this to us in Colorado. This isn't a picture from that, but by illustration, because I don't know if we have trees like that in Colorado, but but I wanted to hear construction hitting power lines, because that happened in Colorado. There was actually construction going on. They were extending the light rail near, and construction knocked out the power. What do you do about it, right? So, I mean, you have to have a plan around those things. But yeah, that happens too. Finally, anyone seen the movie Airplane, right? Okay, that's some of the youngins, yeah, nodding, like shaking their head. All right, so it's weird that I'm not in category anymore. And so the reason why he's showing a plug, that's the funniest picture I could find of someone unplugging something. When we were in our Colorado office, this happened to us. Now, in this building, we're the only tenant in this building. In Colorado, we're in a multi-tenant building. So for those of you, this applies to you differently depending on what kind of building your office might be in. So in Colorado, we're in a multi-tenant building, and so all of the internet connectivity comes into a main maintenance closet of the building. Well, shortly after we opened that office, our internet connection someone unplugged it. I mean, the maintenance closet was supposed to be secured. It was supposed to be, no one was supposed to be able to do those things. We don't know if it was a cleaning crew, maintenance crew, some other internet provider, somebody that might have been mad at us. I don't know what happened in the building. Maybe. I think we're good tenants. But anyway, our internet was unplugged. Troubleshooting and trying to figure out what was going on, and it turned out it was just unplugged. So that happens too, especially if you're in a multi-tenant, control over those things, or if you have cleaning crews or maintenance crews that go through that kind of stuff. All right. So those are the stories I've got, at least to start, but anybody who's got some stories? All the experience in the room? Never had any bad things happen? Okay, we got a story. All right, so we got a microphone here for you too. So the microphone is for the recording, because there's some folks that aren't able to make it. They asked for us to record it, so we're recording it for that purpose. Even though you won't hear your voice, it's for the recording.
Okay. In our building, we had power outage for a short period of time, which then kicked down batteries, and the batteries drained all the way down. So when we came in the morning, we actually couldn't get into the building without physical keys, since the key fob system and everything else was shut down. So
yes.
We were locked out of the building for, 3 hours, 2 hours, until someone showed up with an actual key.
Because your door access system was based on power. Yeah.
They were based on power.
That's good example. Good example. You don't get a raffle ticket though.
This happened in a past life for me, but there was a disgruntled employee that broke into the office over the weekend and stole every single hard drive out of every single server in the building. So that's how he got his retribution. But yeah, that left them kind of scratching their head.
Thank you for the segue for the next demonstration we're going to have about server failure and being able to recover from that.
As long as I have the microphone, I have one too. In a former life as well, there was a low voltage installer. Never can trust those low voltage guys. Hopefully there's. I'm sorry. I actually used to own a low voltage business. So he was hanging a TV and failed to actually look on the other side of where the wall was, and he was drilling in, and there was a power panel on the other side of the. So luckily he survived. He was not killed. But it was in a dental clinic, and the entire floor of this suite went completely dead, and they were SOL for a while.
Good. That's why I want to tell stories, right? We don't always learn from each other, as opposed to having to experience all these things before we can plan around them. And not all the things you can plan around, right? You're not necessarily going to be able to plan around an ice storm or snowstorms or things like that, but it's what are the things that for you and your organization to do to mitigate against these common things that they happen on a regular enough basis. I mean, that's why insurance exists, right? Is because things happen. And what can we do to help mitigate and allow our businesses to continue operating in the event of these instances? All right, so so what are some of the things you can do relative to power? All right, so one of the things that's really simple to be able to do is to increase runtime for your batteries is to just add a battery, right? So, and it's not expensive. If you buy the main unit that's got most of the intelligence to be able to safely shut down your systems and those kind of things, you can actually just add batteries to it if you want to add runtime, right? So if you want some redundancy, there are folks that, again, sometimes you get a little crazy with redundancy because at one point it all goes down to a single point of failure, which is your power grid that plugs into your building, unless you have redundant power coming into your building. But understanding that most of the time batteries are the minimum recommendation for us anyway for our clients is at least 50 minutes of runtime to be able to safely shut things down. But we've definitely had one of our clients does meat packing, and so U.S. I think regulatory body that to where they make sure they get data from their coolers, because they have to be able to track the temperature of the meat while it was through their facility, and they have to continually have that data. So if there's ever an outbreak, they have to be able to go back to the data. So it's really important they never lose power. They wanted to have, I think it was like somewhere between an hour and 2 hours of runtime on battery. And so we just had to figure out what's the load of their system and then add batteries to give them the time they wanted, right? So it's a simple thing. If that's something that's important to you, that's a way you can actually do it that's not that expensive. Of course, the other thing is desktops will not have power, but laptops will. So if laptops are part of your equation, you can still oftentimes have access to systems. For instance, door access systems, voice over IP phones. Laptops will be able to connect to the internet, things like that. Simple little thing you can do if that's something you're interested in. So one of the things about generators, so for our building here, because we're the only tenant, we own the building, we do have a generator. We've configured our electrical for this building so that we can actually extend a generator, have a generator run outside, and power the entire building with a generator. Now, it doesn't work in our building in Colorado. So because multi-tenant office, right? But those are some things you can do. The one thing that's often overlooked, if you do have a generator, is make sure to test it. Fire it up. That's all you gotta do. It takes 5 minutes. Fire up your generator, just make sure it works. Because what you want is to be able to use the generator and then it not work. So basis, George, our facilities maintenance person, pulls it outside, fires it up, make sure it works, and we're good. We do that every quarter. And then if you're leasing office space, one of the things that when we had an office when we were downtown Minneapolis, this was from early 2000s, the building actually had a generator backup plan. So one of the things that if you're looking at different office spaces, you could ask, well, the landlord, because if you don't have control over that, well, what's your backup plan, right? Maybe urge your landlord to have some sort of a generator backup if that's something that could affect your business. And again, because you don't have that choice, but if tenants can, I know that was a big thing for us in that building, because here in this building, we actually have all of our production servers and all our production data is in the cloud, right? So if this building goes down, we're actually fine. We can actually send people home, and we can still serve. We can redirect phones to people's cell phones or VoIP phones, and we can still support our clients, right? But that doesn't always work. So these are some things to think about for power, because again, you can't always solve a power issue. Things you can do about it. What about internet? Okay, so any questions about power? I mean, pretty basic stuff. I mean, kind of. Okay. With regard to internet, does anyone here have at least? I mean, we recommend 2 internet connections. Does anyone have 2 internet connections in here? Multiple internet connections, typically. Yeah. What about anybody have 3? I know we do. Just was curious. There was one person in Colorado that did actually have 3 internet connections. So investing in that. And one of the things that we hear from folks why they wonder, like, why do I don't want to pay for this and then not use it. So one of the reasons why it's a part of our recommendation is we're going to talk about with data later, we always want to make sure your data is backed up offsite. However, the problem is your data backup takes up a lot of bandwidth, and if you only have 1 internet connection, typically we're only able to send that data offsite at night, or if we have to send it off during the day, it could impact your staff and their productivity during the day. So what you can use for a secondary internet connection is not only from a failover perspective to make sure that if one of the internet connection goes out, you can fail over to the tertiary or secondary one, but you can actually use a secondary internet connection to send your data back up offsite on a basis, right? So that's one of our core recommendations. And then when you switch over to a failover, you can actually mitigate some of those services. You can say, hey, backup services are running right now when no one's using it, but if we switch over as a failover, you can actually stop the backup services from going over it, and that way you can give as much bandwidth to your team for productivity. So there's some things you can do in that regard to use the backup internet connection, but it also doesn't need to be an expensive one, right? It can be an inexpensive one as long as you get some bandwidth. And pretty much, I don't know the firewalls that everyone has in this room, but if your firewall that we've recommended, your firewall already has the ability to do this automatically. It's already built into the configuration and capabilities. So you don't have to invest in anything else. Any questions on that? One of the things that came up in Colorado was, well, do you want to have a different internet provider? So the answer is yes. right? So the core recommendation would have a secondary internet connection, also not with the same ISP, right? So if you have two Comcast connections, if Comcast has a problem, well, it doesn't do you any good to have two Comcast connections in. So I'm not picking on Comcast per se, but just knowing that having different types of backups, different types of internet connections are good. Okay. Have a remote work plan that you can act in the event of an outage. Now, if you're a medical facility that has to treat patients and get access to their medical records in the facility, then that could be a difficult plan for you, other than making sure that you mitigate the power or have multiple redundant connections. But otherwise, I know there's plenty of our clients that we work with that have a remote work plan, so that if something like this happened, they can basically just send people home. So for instance, for us, we have a remote access, an SSL VPN, so basically an encrypted remote connection that's always available, that's integrated with our Active Directory. So it's the same username and password that our staff use to sign into their machines every day, so that we don't have to say, oh, and now here's your remote access password. We don't have to worry about trying to distribute that in the event of some sort of outage. We can say, go home, connect to the SSL VPN, which connects to the to our data center, and they can have access to all their tools that they need to use and serve our clients and do their job. So it's important to just understand and have a plan. That is a risk for us because we want to make sure that we're always available for our clients, but that's not always necessarily what applies to you. But this is something you can do as far as thinking through that and putting some sort of plan in place. The other thing you can do that we definitely recommend when it's appropriate, so if there's a business reason to do it, either A, if you're, or if there's a business reason because you're trying to mitigate some of these risks, plan to move some of these essential functions to the data center. What you get with it is you get redundant functions, you get backup, you typically have backup contracts with fuel providers in order to make sure the generator will run. That's just something you get by potentially looking through the environment. So those are some things you can do from an internet connectivity perspective. Now, that doesn't help you if your local internet connection goes down, you don't have redundancy, and you have to serve your clients or your room, but that's just something that you can plan for. Okay, any stories or questions on that? We got another story? A question, okay. Yep. So in an ideal, great. So in an ideal situation, you'd want different types of media. So like fiber, copper, coax, like different so you were not on the same type of media and a different provider, ideally. Because as an ISP, right? So if you have a fiber connection from CenturyLink and a copper connection from CenturyLink, CenturyLink as an ISP could have a problem and you'd still be out, right? So that's typically, again, in an ideal situation, but the problem is sometimes, depending on your location, you might not be able to get the bandwidth you need at the price that makes sense. So you just got to make that business decision, right? So again, it's a different type of risk. It's rare that ISPs have those kind of problems these days. Usually it's a physical problem, like somebody digs up a line or some piece of hardware flakes out that's on the copper versus fiber. What's that? Or a car crashing into it, which happens, right? So yeah, those are the kind of things that happen, right? I mean, the technology usually works pretty well in that regard. It's just random issues. So it's good. Okay, sorry, we're technology nerds here, so we appreciate. Okay, so one last section, then we'll get to the demo here. So don't forget about the firewall. So does everyone here understand what a firewall is? And if the answer is no, that's okay. So firewall, and I was going to try and find a diagram but none of them were, I just wanted something simple, right? It's like you have your network, you have the internet, and the firewall stands in between it, right? So that's basically the primary gateway through which everything flows. So the firewall is an often overlooked piece of equipment because if you build redundant power and you have redundant internet connections, you have all this redundancy and reliability built in, and then you have one firewall. Now you've got this single point of failure that is actually controls all the stuff we were just trying to mitigate in the first place. So things like email, security filters, video and web conferencing, hosted applications, remote site in particular, voice over IP phones, Facebook and LinkedIn, right? So all these things, if Facebook and LinkedIn is part of your marketing engine, for instance, but all these things go away. So depending on some folks, anybody have voice over IP phones that goes across your internet connections? Okay, several of you do. So that would be a problem. Anybody use video training or video conferencing? Yeah, I know we do. I know more and more training is released via video. So like on that in conferences. So these are the things that can go down. Obviously, anything that's access to the internet. So let's hit a couple of these examples. This is my VoIP phone, by the way. So one of our clients actually had a single had a single firewall, and there's two main stories that there are issues that firewalls can address if these are things that you want to mitigate for your business. So they had a single firewall, and they were doing some troubleshooting. There was something wrong between the VoIP provider and working through the firewall, and they needed to do an update on the firewall, which was going to cause a reboot. But they didn't want to do that during the middle of the day because of the voice over IP traffic and some of the other traffic and the video conferencing or anything that might disrupt their access to the ERP system or whatever, or their EMR system. So their software application. So we basically had to wait till the end of the day. So one of the things you can do to mitigate that is, which we'll tell later, but there's a way you can mitigate that problem so that you can actually do some reboots in the middle of the day, but yet it won't disrupt any of that traffic. Especially if you have remote sites, if you're doing voice over IP between sites, that's definitely something. So of doing it, but it's an illustration. So this one, it's the best image I could find of a fire blowing up. So that's kind of, I was trying to go with the fire theme today. So one of our clients, again, real stories. One of our clients in Colorado, in particular, using a little bit of an extreme example, but they have an office. So if you know Denver, it's on the east side of the mountains, but yet there's a part of Colorado that's on the west side of the mountains, and they had an office on the west side of the mountains, and their firewall died. So we fortunately did have one in stock that we could run out there, but it was like a 5-hour drive to get them a new firewall. So they were minimally down for 5 hours because of just a simple hardware failure, right? So there are things you can do to mitigate against that happening. And again, because life, our businesses depend on the internet in many regards. Again, the profound statement. These are some things you can do. So what can you do about a firewall? So there's some basic things you can do. Keeping the firewall less than 5 years old. And sometimes, depending on how security goes and how your bandwidth goes, sometimes you got to bring that down to the 3-year mark, but definitely less than after 5, you increase the probability of that firewall blowing up, like we just talked about. The other thing you can do is maintain security subscriptions, and oftentimes when you're maintaining the security subscription, you're also maintaining the warranty. So that way, at least you can get quick hardware failure, quick hardware replacement if something like that happens. Now, those are the core things to do. What we would recommend, if these are some of the things you want to mitigate, you can invest in a high availability solution. So the reason why I invited Luke and Dave from SonicWall, their solution, SonicWall does this in a unique way that is actually one of the least expensive ways to do it in the industry. If you look at different manufacturers of firewalls, SonicWall is one of the cheapest ways to do it because of the way they do it. Because basically to get a secondary unit, so say if you're your primary firewall, and if you get a secondary unit, you're basically just buying the hardware, the warranty, the security subscription, the support, all that stuff. If it's a secondary unit, it associates with the primary unit, so you don't have to buy it twice. All you have to do is basically pay for the hardware from a redundancy perspective. So they make it really nice to be able to do that. And so the idea is that to solve, going back to the two stories we told, if they're the customer that had a voice over IP solution going on and they needed to reboot the firewall, the way the SonicWalls work together is, and again, I'm generically talking about firewalls, but I know SonicWalls have these capabilities, and that's one of our primary vendors that we recommend for firewalls, is that it'll basically reboot this one while this one stays online. It'll bring this one back up. It'll transfer the services over to this one, and then this one will reboot, and it'll come back online, and then they establish the pair. So basically, you never lose any traffic. So you can reboot it in the middle of the day. You don't lose any video conferencing. You don't lose access to your software. You don't lose any voice over IP calls. You don't lose any of that stuff. So the larger your organization, the more people you have depending on that internet connection, and especially if you have remote sites that might be going over that you have a lot of traffic going back and forth, have to consider a high availability solution is really where we recommend it. So if internet is really critical to you and having some key redundancy points, this is one of the ones that's the most commonly overlooked. We have a lot of clients that have secondary internet connections. We have much fewer that actually have high availability firewall configuration. It's not that complex to do, and it's not that expensive to do, but it mitigates against a common problem. So I guess any questions or thoughts or comments before we move on? All right, very good. Even with raffle tickets involved. Okay, so now we are going to go. I'm going to hand it over to Bobby. So forgive us as we got to switch over the mic and a couple things over here. Oh, you just twist it. Right? Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, there will be some fire towards the end. Have a few slides to run through, but then we'll get to the fun stuff of the demo. So I'm going to run through a few PowerPoint slides. It's going to echo a lot of what we just went over as far as kind of disasters and things you've seen that cause outages and what you can kind of do to mitigate that and keep things back up and running. So once this comes up, just the start slide. Nice picture of my beautiful face there and kind of an awkward sideways pose, but we'll move on from that. And so who is Datto? We were founded in 2007 by Austin McCord, who is our CEO, so just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. He is quite young. He's 32 years old, which allows for the entire company. We all got to go there, had the park to ourselves for about 4 or 5 hours to run around and do what we wanted. So very nice and cool that he is that young. We do have 900 plus employees, and it is. I started about half years ago and was in the 200s for the employee that I was. So a lot of growth and just continuing to go up from there. We do have offices all across the globe. We have several that are in the US. There is one in Boston. I'm out of the headquarters in Norwalk, Connecticut. So have another in Portland, Oregon, along with the UK and Singapore and a few others there. With that are across the globe as well. Once we get into the backup side of things, you'll understand why we need those data in the US with that. There are 70% of our team is in support and development. So we are really focused on the customer experience and continue new features to our product. Joe is a developer himself, so he really stays true to that with so many people being a part of that team. And a big piece of the cloud, I get on calls with people and do product demos, and a lot of them say, who is Datto? Why am I going to trust you with my data? Where is my data going? And part of that is that we are 100% channel only. So we work with tech companies or MSPs such as Mytech that then bring the product to you. And our cloud, those 2 data centers in the US and the others around the globe, hosts over 300 petabytes of data. I think it might be closer to the 350 mark now, but it is a lot of data that is stored in those 2 data centers. And a big piece of what we're going to talk about is rethinking backup. When you think of backup and disaster recovery, it's, hey, I have all my files and folders on my servers and different machines in my office. We need those to be stored somewhere else, whether it's in the office. And a really good plan is to also have that site, whether it's in a bank vault, sometimes it's one of the chief's houses, and it sits there before it gets rotated. But time to start thinking of that in a different way. And we have some nice pictures of disasters here, kind of what we were talking about, the fires, the floods, which you probably don't deal with too much, the big tornadoes or storms that do come through. But when we look at the backup industry, and a lot of calls that our tech support team is not disasters that are happening. While that certainly is something that can take place, the power outages, you're going to different things like that. Anyone want to take a guess what the biggest cause of downtime is or data being removed from a company? What causes the malware to be on that system? You and us, the users. So someone there with the head in the hands. I know at Datto, knock this off the mic, but
I know at Datto, every so often we do get an email blasted out to the community. This email is going out. Please don't click on it. And they, for some reason, put a actual hyperlink to the email. And when you click it, it brings you to the phishing site and the one that's warning you. And it always causes huge issues. So I know even at our company, which is backup and disaster recovery and trying to, it is an issue there as well. And just slide there, people are your greatest risks. We do have some articles regarding it. This is from several years ago with Alcoa and a phishing scam. If you're not familiar with phishing, it's someone sending out an email, pretending to be a company, pretending to be another person, to get you to click on a link and enter in your information there so that from you. Probably the most important part about this article is this one snippet from it. At least one employee will click on anything. Inbox gets filled up with a bunch of emails. You're clicking through, trying to get through everything that you can, and you click on that one link, not noticing what it is, and then a machine's infected. You're entering in information to someone that's trying to steal it. And the Pentagon as well. There was a big phishing attack there, and another big piece is spear phishing, is what it's being called, which is much more directed attacks to you, where they kind of monitor your social media, they get the information from you, so when they do email, it's not some generic email from Facebook or from Google. It's listing out names of people that you know or companies that you work with, so you trust it a lot more to enter in your information. And so rethinking backup, what we touched on before, and what we want to do is start thinking continuity. Business continuity is a term you'll hear me throw out a bit of a buzzword in the backup industry, I guess we can say. And when we talk about business continuity, what we're talking about is time. Eliminating that downtime if there was a fire, there's a flood, there is some type of ice storm or power outage, or someone did click on that email and got your network infected with ransomware or some type of malware. That's really what we're trying to do at Datto, is eliminate that downtime from your company. And so what is not continuity? Cloud only. You install software on your machines in the office, that gets dumped to the cloud, and that is just where it's living. It's great that that data is in another place, but then what happens when you need to restore? You're reliant on that internet connection, which needs to still be up, and your download speeds to pull that down, which can take a long time to do. The local only side of things is that data living in one location. If it's still at the office and there's some type of disaster there, you lost your machines and your backups as well. And then also file-based backup. And in a few minutes, we'll touch on the difference between file-based and image-based as far as backups go. And what is continuity? So it is a hybrid cloud-based backup. So you have the data living locally as well as offsite in another location. With Datto, like I said, we do have a redundant data center. So the data is backed up locally, then offsite, and then also to our other data center. One data center is in Pennsylvania, the other is in Utah. So it does get synced to both. It is the image-based backup side of things, which we have some little images we'll look at for that. And delivers superior RTO and RPO. So recovery time objective and recovery. Those are going to tie into how often are you backing up? Are you backing up every hour? Are you backing up once per day, once per week? Because if you do have some type of disaster or outage, how far back do you need to go to get that data? Are you going to lose that 24 hours of data that's going to be gone forever? Can you just go back 50 minutes and get that data from there? It eliminates downtime. And a big piece which I'm going to be demoing is the virtualization, which is taking a backup and bringing it up as a virtual machine so you can continue on with the business day. And here we are for the file versus image-based backups. When we look at the file-based backup, on the left-hand side there, we have your production servers, whatever machines you are backing up. And when you're doing that backup, it's just bringing your files and folders over. So in my computer, you have your documents, whatever the case may be. It's just grabbing the actual data, and that's what's being copied over. And on the image-based backup side of things, it's making an entire copy of that system that we are backing up, and it's dumping that to the other location. So all of the applications, the operating system, the softwares, including that data as well, is all going to be backed up to another location. And so what happens when you need to restore from a file-based backup? You have to build a new server. If there was a hardware that went bad, something like that, you need to build a new box. You need to install the operating system on it. You then need to install that different type of software, whether it's accounting, any type of medical management system, anything like that. And then once that's done, you can do your recovery back. So getting into that downtime conversation. You're still down while you're installing all of that and then doing the copy of that data back over to the machine. With the image-based side of things, since we already have the operating system, the applications, and the data, we are just taking that, bringing it directly back over to that machine, and now you're back up and running in your environment at that point. And a big piece to that is the instant virtualization. So you have a machine that, in that case, it's getting infected with ransomware, but any type of disaster happens where it's down. You then have your physical data device, which we have one running here, that you have been running the backups of your machines to. Then from the data, we can get that machine back up and running, which we'll see once we hop into the interface. But that's reduced downtime. When you have a file-based backup and you need to restore, you're down until the data is copied back over. What the data allows you to do is spin that up as the virtualization, and you're up and running for the time being while you figure out what's going on. While you're restoring power, while you are fixing that machine or ordering a new server, it's still up and running on that physical data device at your location. And then continuity, but can you show us? So what is a disaster demo, which I'm going to be running through here? We have a machine. We're going to pull that down. It's going to be that little ASUS box that I have sitting over there. Then the data device, we're going to get that machine up and running as a virtualization on it, and I'll pull up that PowerPoint presentation on there as well. So let me close out of this. I'm just going to pull up the interface so it's ready when I get over to it. All right, perfect. So over here at my little station, I have a few things, a data device. We have the networking, just a little switch here that's connecting the two, and we have the ASUS box. So ASUS box can stand for a lot of things, your database server, anything like that that you have been backing up at your location. And fitting in with the disaster side of things, what can go wrong? So I'm just going to pop open the lid to this. You have a drive that goes bad, some piece of hardware that is going bad in that machine. So I can pull this out. There's the drive of it. And then the big one, which let's make it a little fun here. Hope Mytech has good insurance. The big fire that happens. So there's a lot that can cause the machine to go down. Hardware bad, power outage, anything to that effect. And that's why we have that physical data device. And just because I didn't touch on it before going over to the device, so you know kind of how it would work in your business. We have these devices. There are a wide range of sizes for them, so we can make sure we fit it into your environment as it's needed. So backing up this to this data device or several machines to it, you're not just limited to the one. It can be servers, it can be workstations if we needed to. And then gonna hop over to the interface here. And this is the interface for a data device. And right now we're on the home page. It shows us the several machines I'm backing up to it here under the local storage used. So what I'll do is just jump over to the restore tab there at the top. And on restore on the left-hand side is a list of machines I'm currently backing up. So I'm going to select this one. And in the middle here, my recovery option is going to be local virtualization. On the right-hand side is a list of backup points I can recover from. So I do have many that I can go back to. I back up this machine every hour, Monday through Friday, and hit start virtualization. Then on the next page, there are some options for the VM. I can select the resources I'll give to it, the CPU cores and the system RAM, and also the network options, which is a big piece. I'm going to leave it as disconnected just for the demo purposes, but in the event one of your servers did go, we can give this virtual machine we're pulling up network connectivity so everyone can continue working off of it. So then from here on the right-hand side, I'm going to select Start VM. And it is a very quick process to get these restores up and running on the data device. It'll give us that nice little status bar there. And once it is actually powered on and running, it will give me access to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this screenshot it's giving me, and that'll pop open a new tab in just a second. And here we're going to have that virtual machine booting up. So this VM is now booting up from my most recent backup point on a data device itself that's living at a physical location. And once we get booted in here, I would recommend password protecting your machines. Just doing this for demo purposes, definitely not good to just have it logged directly into the OS. And I'll pop open that PowerPoint. So kind of a very simple example, right? Typically, you're not backing up machines so that you can pull it up to do a PowerPoint presentation in the event you are at one of these and there's some big fire that happens to your laptop or whatever the case may be. But kind of think a bit bigger than that, right? You do have a lot of servers that people are continuously working off of. Finance has their accounting systems, working off of different databases on the back end that allows them to continue on and get revenue for your business. And that's really the business continuity. If server goes down, you are back up and running on the Datto device, and everyone can use that work. And while this virtual machine is up and running and people do work off of it and make changes, we keep backing it up. So when it comes time to restore that new piece of hardware that you purchase or whatever the case is, we have an up-to-date backup available to get restored back for you. And so I'm just going to pull this down, and there is one other thing I do want to show you that kind of ties in along with that. There is some automated backup testing that does take place as well, and it's what we call the screenshot process. And what that does is it takes a backup point each day, and it mounts that as a virtual machine on that Datto device itself. Let me hop over to the page for it. So each machine I'm backing up has this last screenshot at whichever time and day was successful message. This is the one that I just pulled up as a VM, and if I click that green successful box, it gives me this pop-up window. So what we're looking at here is now of when my device took a backup point last night at 5 p.m., and it brought that up as one of the virtual machines, and it took a screen capture of it once it was fully booted. And that's letting you know, in the event your server were to go down, you have the ability to get it successfully booted as a VM to get it back on the network and in production. It's really an ease of mind tool, so you know, hey, my backups are completing successfully, and those backups are also in a bootable state. And just along that same line, if it was a total site down situation, because your data has been synced to our cloud as well, you have all the machines you're backing up as virtual. You can get connected through just basic remote desktop, which brings you to the interface. We can set up VPN keys to connect directly to that network. So with that business continuity, the image-based backup, the hybrid solution, you can restore locally as well as offsite from there. That's going to cover everything, and I'm going to toss it back over unless there's any questions anyone wanted to ask. No? Sure, so on the cloud spin-up side of things, it's not going to be done through this interface we're looking at. The Datto device, that physical box, actually hosts this. We do have another page. I'm not sure if I'm logged into it. Let's see. If not, we can really quick. But there is another page that Datto hosts itself, and that's what would allow you to do that cloud spin-up.
The trick with the cloud restore is that, like, if it's a server, if it's a backup that's already your environment, it emulates all the properties of what that server that might have just failed, right? So that means that your endpoints, like for instance, if your machines, when you log into your laptop or desktop or whatever, are used to connecting to server whatever, server A, it'll emulate all the properties of server A. So if the production server A goes down and we bring up server A on the backup device, your machines don't know any different. They automatically just connect to it and it works. In the cloud, it's a little different, right? Because server A now no longer exists in your office, which is where your machines are used to going to look for them. Now server A exists in the cloud. So in order for you to get to server A in a cloud restore perspective, that's why Bobby was mentioning the VPN keys or a remote desktop connection. So you have to be able to then reroute people to the cloud version, which is you are able to do, but it just takes a little bit more networking. Or if you already have a remote desktop connection, already have a VPN built into your infrastructure that's being backed up, you can just really turn that on in the cloud as well. Yeah. So I wanted to give you a little time to
no, yeah, I just wanted to get logged in to show you. This is where you can pull up those complete offsite restores. As far as the connection side of things go, it's really going to depend on kind of your business to continue running. Typically, I see the VPN keys used, which are very simple. It's a download. You run the download, and then you're connected directly to the offsite network that these virtual machines are running on. Then at that point, it would, in the sense that you are on the same local network where you can hit their local IP addresses, you can map your network drives, access them too. So certainly have that cloud spin-up option. Yep. Mm-hmm. Sure.
For the sake of the recording, I'll repeat that question. I should have ran over there and given you the mic. That's okay, Andy. That's fine. You're okay. No, so that was with a minimal amount of data to be able to restore. When you're dealing with data that's more of the capacity of what a server might have, 500 gigs or more, what does that look like from a restore perspective?
Sure. So the virtualization side of things is very quick. It will take the same amount of time we just saw, regardless of the size of that machine. For the most part, if there's like an outrageous number would be 20, but let's just say there's 20 volumes on a machine and we have to attach all those to the VM. That's going to take a little bit more time, but the actual size of it shouldn't really matter. When we do the backup itself, it's doing a physical to virtual conversion. So whether it's a physical or virtual machine we're actually backing up, during the backup process, we're essentially making it virtual. So when we do have to pull up that VM, it is very quick. What the kind of back process is we clone the backup point, which takes a couple of seconds, attach the disks to a VM template, and then it's getting powered on. I would say the longest kind of process of that is it actually booting into the operating system, from what I've seen. So mounting it on our device, very quick, but that actual boot process up is going to take as long as it needs to take, like a regular machine.
In a production environment, how many users could be on one device if you had to bring that up as a temporary server if a server failed or something like that? I mean, how many can it handle for a processor?
So it depends, kind of a hard question to answer. When I said a bit earlier, we have a wide range of storage sizes for the devices. That also goes along with resources. So we have devices that start at 500 gigs and go all the way up to 120 terabytes with a lot of different options. As you go up, the resources increase. We can also upgrade the resources. So it really depends on how many people you need to connect, and we'll up the processing, we'll up the memory that's available, so you can allot it to that virtual machine. But shouldn't have any issues running it in production. On the cloud side of things, you may see a bit of performance degradation because you're going over that internet connection, and that's really what you're dependent on. But depends on the environment. If it's a database, you're going to need to allot a lot more resources than other machines. So it's dependent, but you shouldn't have any issues running it in production at all.
That was the question I was going to ask if nobody asked it, so thank you for doing that.
I wish I could give a more 50 users and you're good type of answer, but it really is dependent on the environment.
Well, that's part of how, part of our scoping process, whenever we're making a recommendation, we engage with our engineering team to look at that, understand, okay, well, what are they running? How much data is it taking up? And so that we can scale the device appropriately, because that is, we want to be able to, do these things, right? So if we scale the backup device wrong, then what if we don't have enough space on the backup device to run it and do the backup at the same time, right? So there's definitely some method to making a recommendation in that regard, but that is part of our key considerations, is not just the data, but also the resources in the event that we might have to turn the stuff on. In general, what I know we typically tell people is that, you're in a disaster mode, so it's probably okay to expect a little degradation in performance from your regular production environment. Because you don't intend on running in that space long, right? You want to get back to the production environment as quickly as possible to get the full resources back, right? So that's typically how we recommend. Last questions? All right. Well, thank you, Bobby. Thank
Absolutely.
You very much. Appreciate
Thanks,
that.
everyone. Do this back here.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and adjourn the primary session here. So thank you. So we will, I think, yeah, there you go. So we have the food ready over there.